Chapter 1: The Inheritance. The family of Dashwood had long been established in Sussex. Their estate, Norland Park, had been the seat of generations, nestled in the gentle countryside near Barton. For many years it had been home to a wealthy old man, an uncle to Henry Dashwood, who, late in life, invited Henry and his family to live with him. This gesture was not purely sentimental. The old gentleman had grown attached to Henry's young son from a previous marriage, and it was widely assumed that Norland would pass to him. But when the old man finally died, his last will changed everything. Instead of spreading his considerable fortune across the Dashwood family, he left it all, house, land, and money, to the boy he had raised, young John Dashwood, Henry's son from his first marriage. It was a blow to Henry Dashwood, who had hoped to provide comfortably for his second wife and their 3 daughters, Eleanor, Marianne, and Margaret. Henry, though not poor, had only a modest personal fortune. Still, he was a kind and thoughtful man, and on his deathbed, he made John promise to look after his stepmother and half-sisters. John, a respectable but weak-willed man, readily agreed. But after Henry died and the estate formally passed to John, his sense of duty quickly faded under the influence of his wife, Fanny Dashwood. Chapter 2: Promises Unkept. Fanny Dashwood was not a cruel woman, but she was proud, calculating, and fiercely protective of her own interests. She saw her husband's promise as foolish sentiment. Fanny, dismissive. Your father never meant for you to do anything extravagant. A few visits, some friendly attention, that would satisfy everyone. John, eager to believe her, began revising his intentions. First, he thought to give his sisters £1,000 each. Then it became 500. Then nothing. John, rationalizing, they will have £10,000 between them. That's a good sum, and they'll be comfortable elsewhere. They don't need more. With that, the Dashwood women were left with no home, no security, only each other. Chapter 3: The Dashwood Women. Mrs. Dashwood, though hurt, was proud and refused to remain long under Fanny's roof at Norland. Her eldest daughter, Eleanor, tried to calm her. Eleanor was the voice of reason in the family, intelligent, composed, practical. Her younger sister Marianne was her opposite, passionate, impulsive, and romantic. Margaret, the youngest, was lively and curious, still too young for society but full of spirit. Before they left Norland, Eleanor formed a quiet but mutual affection with Fanny's brother, Edward Ferrars. Edward was unassuming and kind, not a man of ambition, but sincere and thoughtful. He admired Eleanor's sense, and she respected his gentleness. But Fanny, suspecting their attachment, was appalled. Fanny, coldly, "My brother must marry well. He has a future to consider." This only hardened Mrs. Dashwood's resolve to leave Norland as soon as possible. Chapter 4. Barton Cottage. A letter arrived from a distant cousin, Sir John Middleton, inviting them to live in a small house on his estate in Devonshire. Barton Cottage. It was modest but charming, with a view of the sea and green hills all around. The Dashwoods accepted the offer and moved with dignity and hope. Though the cottage was small, they were grateful for their independence. Their lives adjusted slowly to the simpler surroundings. Sir John Middleton, their host, was generous and cheerful. He loved company and delighted in filling his home, Barton Park, with guests. His wife, Lady Middleton, was elegant but shallow, more interested in appearances than in conversation. Among their frequent guests was Mrs. Jennings, Lady Middleton's mother, a cheerful widow with a fondness for matchmaking and gossip. Mrs. Jennings, playfully, "Well, well, we must find husbands for you girls. Miss Marianne, you shall marry a colonel." She referred to Colonel Brandon, a friend of Sir John's, who had taken an early interest in Marianne. Chapter 5. The Colonel and the Contrast. Colonel Brandon was a reserved man in his mid-30s. He had a quiet dignity and a gentle manner. He admired Marianne's beauty and liveliness, but she found him uninteresting. Marianne, to Eleanor, "He's too grave, too silent, and he's 35. What could he possibly know of love?" Eleanor gently chided her. "Eleanor, sense and feeling can live in silence, Marianne. He may feel more than he shows." But Marianne, who believed true love must be wild and poetic, paid no attention. She soon met a man who seemed to match her ideals perfectly, Mr. Willoughby. Chapter 6. Willoughby Appears. One rainy afternoon, while walking on the downs, Marianne slipped and injured her ankle. A man on horseback appeared, dismounted, and carried her home in his arms. He was young, handsome, and gallant. His name was John Willoughby, and from that moment on, Marianne's heart was his. They spent days walking, reading poetry, and talking for hours. Willoughby was charming and spontaneous, everything Marianne dreamed of. Marianne, breathless, "He is the very picture of my soul." Eleanor, watching quietly, grew uneasy. Willoughby's attentions were intense but without commitment. Eleanor, carefully, "Do you believe he intends to propose?" Marianne, confidently, "I have no doubt. We understand each other perfectly." Mrs. Dashwood, too, believed they were engaged, though nothing was said aloud. Then suddenly, everything changed. Chapter 7. A Sudden Departure. Willoughby came to the cottage one morning with strange formality. Willoughby, serious. "I must return to London immediately. I cannot explain now, but I hope we meet again." Marianne was stunned. No letter followed. No explanation came. She sank into despair, refusing company, walking endlessly in the rain, weeping in solitude. Colonel Brandon, still quietly devoted, observed her pain in silence. Then, one morning, he too left suddenly, called away by urgent business, he said. Chapter 8: London and Disappointment. Mrs. Jennings invited Eleanor and Marianne to London for the winter season. Marianne hoped to see Willoughby again. Eleanor, still thinking of Edward Ferrars, agreed. They arrived to a whirlwind of visits and society events. But weeks passed, and still no word from Willoughby. Then, at a grand ball, he appeared. Marianne ran to him. Marianne, Mr. Willoughby. He bowed coldly. Willoughby, formal. Miss Dashwood, I trust you are well. She turned pale. That night, a letter came. Willoughby denied everything. He wrote that he had never proposed, never intended anything more than friendship. He was now engaged to a wealthy heiress, Miss Sophia Grey. Marianne collapsed in tears. Chapter 9: Eleanor's Strength. While Marianne grieved, Eleanor bore her own heartbreak quietly. Lucy Steele, a guest in London, confided to Eleanor a shocking secret. She had been secretly engaged to Edward Ferrars for 4 years. Lucy, smugly, "You see, Miss Dashwood, I know how close you and Edward have been, but I assure you, I have his heart." Eleanor was stunned, but remained composed. She told no one, not even Marianne. Chapter 10: Broken Ties. Mrs. Ferrars, Edward's mother, eventually discovered the engagement and was furious. She demanded Edward ended, but he refused. He chose honor over wealth and was disinherited. Lucy, calculating as ever, quickly turned her attention to Edward's younger brother, Robert, and married him instead. This betrayal set Edward free. Chapter 11: Love Realized. Edward soon came to Barton Cottage. There, in nervous tones, he told Eleanor the news. "Edward, I am no longer engaged. Lucy married my brother." Eleanor, "Then you are free?" Edward, hopeful, "Yes, if your feelings are still what they were." She burst into tears, not of sorrow, but of joy. They married shortly after and settled in the parsonage at Delaford, near Colonel Brandon's estate. And what of Marianne? Chapter 12: The Recovery. Marianne Dashwood, after Willoughby's cold letter and public betrayal, fell into deep grief. She withdrew from society, spoke little, and wandered the hills around Barton Cottage in despair. Cold and constant rain brought on a serious illness. She grew pale, feverish, and weak. For days, Eleanor and Mrs. Dashwood feared for her life. Colonel Brandon arrived the moment he heard. He rode through the night, soaked and exhausted, asking only, "Brandon, urgent. How is she?" He stayed near, ready to help, silent in his care. Slowly, Marianne recovered. Her fever broke. The worst had passed. And in that quiet, vulnerable space, something shifted within her. She began to reflect, not just on Willoughby's cruelty, but on her own past, her impulsive behavior, her rejection of caution, her scorn for quiet, steady affections. Marianne, to Eleanor. I have been selfish, Eleanor. I valued display over character, emotion over wisdom. I thought love must be wild to be real. Eleanor took her hand, Eleanor. And now, Marianne, I know better. If I could be like you, I'd be happier. Chapter 13. The Confession. Some weeks later, Willoughby arrived at Barton seeking Eleanor. He asked to speak just once, Willoughby pleading, "I must explain, not to excuse myself, but so you'll know I did care for her." He confessed he had truly loved Marianne, but he had debts and no inheritance. His actions in the past, seducing and abandoning a young girl named Eliza, were discovered by Colonel Brandon. The scandal cost him his welcome at Barton Park. When Miss Sophia Gray offered a fortune, he chose it, but he regretted it. He still thought of Marianne, Willoughby, bitterly. I might have been happy with her. I might have been better, but I failed. Eleanor listened calmly. Eleanor, she loved you and she suffered, but she is healing now. Do not try to disturb her peace again. Willoughby left alone. Chapter 14. A New View of Love. As Marianne's strength returned, so did her spirits. But they were gentler now. The wild romanticism of her youth had faded. She began to take notice of Colonel Brandon, not just his kindness, but the quiet devotion he had always shown. She asked about his past, and he told her. Years ago, he had loved a girl named Eliza, who had been forced to marry his brother and lived a tragic life. Her child, also named Eliza, was the one Willoughby had seduced and abandoned. Marianne listened with sympathy and growing warmth. Marianne, thoughtful, you have borne so much, and still you are gentle. Colonel Brandon, ever patient, asked nothing. But over time, a closeness formed, based not on fiery emotion, but on mutual respect, shared values, and a deeper, steadier love. Chapter 15. 2 weddings. With Edward and Eleanor married and settled at the Delaford parsonage, the family remained close. Colonel Brandon often visited. When he proposed to Marianne, she accepted, not with the giddy thrill of youth, but with a mature understanding of what love truly meant. Marianne, smiling, I once thought passion was everything, but now I see constancy is far more rare and far more precious. Their wedding was simple but joyful. Marianne moved moved to Delaford, not far from her sister. The two couples, Eleanor and Edward, Marianne and Brandon, lived in close friendship, often visiting, walking together, and watching the next generation grow. Chapter 16. Reflections. Mrs. Dashwood remained at Barton Cottage with Margaret, who was now growing into a fine young woman, spirited, intelligent, and curious. Under Eleanor's guidance and Marianne's example, Margaret found a balance between sensibility and sense. Sir John Middleton continued to throw dinners and host guests, declaring proudly that 2 fine marriages had come out of Barton. Mrs. Jennings, ever fond of matchmaking, now focused her energies on younger acquaintances, but always remained close to the Dashwood sisters. As for Willoughby, he lived out his marriage in comfort, but not happiness. He sometimes wondered what his life might have been had he chosen differently. But that door had closed. Chapter 17. Sense and Sensibility. In time, Eleanor and Marianne often spoke of all that had passed, Marianne reflecting. When I compare my present feelings with what I once believed to be love, I wonder at myself. What I feel now is calm, lasting happiness. What I felt then was madness. Eleanor, we have both learned, you from feeling too much, I perhaps from suppressing too much. Marianne, you taught me that love can be quiet and real. I once thought sense was dull, but I see now it's what kept you strong. Their bond as sisters, always close, had grown even deeper. Through hardship, heartbreak, and healing, they had supported each other, never perfectly, but always truly. In the end, it was not simply sense or sensibility that brought them happiness, but the balance of both. And so concludes the story of Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood, a story not of dramatic adventure or grand events, but of real lives and genuine feelings, of how love, when guided by character and strengthened by time, survives every trial, and of how 2 sisters, so different in nature, each found her place in the world, her peace, and her joy. You've been listening to Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen.